All right. Everybody, welcome. This is our very first Sandbox Cooperative. It's great to see everybody here. And for those of you tuning in online, welcome. Just so I don't forget what the heck I'm saying. Here, let me grab my notes real quick. That's actually a really good place to start. My name is Chris Roberts. I've been part of the team to develop this, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been great just trying to pull this all together and just kind of see what we can make of it. So I hope tonight is just a great evening. With that, this is the first time that we've done this. Really, the first time that we've done anything like this. So things are bound to go wrong. In fact, they have. and it's great. You know what? We're all still here, and we're gonna have a great conversation. Shane's got some great stuff to share with us, and yeah, it'll be a great night. We're coming to you live right now from obviously those of you who are here know where we are at, but we're in Rochester, Minnesota, and we're at Studio 324 at Fagan Studios. This is, as I said, we're just getting started with this. This is actually a startup initiative from Glory Day Lutheran Church here in town. And we're just hoping to create a forum and just kind of a place and a space for people to come and have conversations about issues that are maybe difficult or don't get talked about very often, and just kind of want to provide that place for that conversation and just the ability to have those interactions with each other and just kind of open that space up that sometimes maybe especially in church settings especially maybe hasn't been very open. So that's kind of the goal of tonight, and of if this works well and we do more of these, of just that conversation in general, of just kind of opening that space. Right now, I believe we're going to send it over to Kate, who has some info for us about social media.
So before we get started, there's a couple logistical things for those of you viewing online. Welcome, and I suppose this applies for people in the room too. So the people in the room can ask questions right here, and that's great. But the people online, you can use Facebook and Twitter with the hashtag Sandbox Co-op, or right on the live stream page in the chat box. Go ahead and ask those questions or comments, and we'll do our best throughout the evening to get them to Shane. And also, if you're viewing online, we'd love to know where you're viewing from. So why don't you start by checking in with where you're from on either Facebook, Twitter, or live stream, and then tell us how many people are watching with you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Kate. So now I'm gonna welcome up Dave Berg. He's also been part of this team creating Sandbox Cooperative, and just welcome.
Thanks. Oh, you people are amazing. That's right. I saw the people who didn't clap. Duly noted. So excited to be here today. This has been a dream for some time, to create a venue, create a space for conversation, and a space that we can tackle some of the big questions, tackle some of the big issues, sometimes controversial issues, sometimes deep things that we don't have a chance to talk about or a space to talk about, that we can talk about it in different configurations. Whether it's the people who are able to be here live at Studio 324, or maybe it's people who are gathering with family and friends at home. Maybe it's you're at home and you're watching this by yourself, but you can interact with us through social media. Whatever it is, we're glad that you're here. We're going to be talking about call and purpose and finding your sweet spot and all of that. So we're excited about this opportunity to connect with Shane. Now, a word about Shane Hips. Shane is with us today, and we've had a great opportunity to meet him throughout the day and find out a little bit about what makes him tick. He was a teaching pastor at Mars Hill Bible Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan for a number of years, worked alongside of Rob Bell there. He was a senior pastor at a Mennonite congregation in Phoenix, Arizona. He has written several books, and I've got them here, and we have them for sale here as well. But Selling Water by the River, a book about the life Jesus promised and religion that gets in the way. Also, Flickering Pixels, How Technology Shapes Your Faith. I understand that he has another one in the works, kind of a working title of Cats Don't Bark, Finding Your Purpose. Really excited to see what that book on purpose is, and to learn more about that. But Shane is also right now serving as Chief Leadership Officer at a real estate development firm in Texas, and so he's covered a gamut of different careers and opportunities. But I'd like to invite Shane to come and join us now. Welcome, Shane. It is a little lopsided. Shane, it's been a long day.
Yeah.
It's good to have you here. So glad to have you here. As we get started, I know I run a risk of kind of coming off like Zach Galifianakis and putting you between two ferns and asking all kinds of awkward questions. But your career path. You went for working in advertising for Porsche, was one of the accounts that you worked with. Then you naturally left that and went to seminary to learn to become a pastor. You became a pastor of a small Mennonite congregation. Then you left that for a megachurch, like a 10,000-person megachurch, and all along the way writing books and talking at different things like this. And now working as the Chief Leadership Officer for a real estate development company in Texas. So what's next for your career? No, so what is the, what do you have to say about purpose and call? Tell us more about your journey.
So, I mean, for one, the fact that my journey is full of zigs and zags tells you something about how bad I am at understanding calling and purpose. But in point of fact, actually, every one of those zigs and zags has a kind of a common theme, which is connected with to two real primary purposes in life. One is about communication, and the other is about the development of people. And so that has been the trunk of the tree, even though there's been these offshoots and branches along the way. But a major part of every one of those branches is a significant shift. Every about 5 years, I seem to detonate my life, and then I just like, oh, I guess it's time for like a revolution of the soul, and then I start over again and pick up the pieces. I don't know why I'm doing that, but I seem to be made that way, so I just keep doing it. But along the way, what that means for me is that I've learned a lot about various techniques. I'm a collector of tools and techniques around how you live your purpose in this life and how you sort out why you're here. And so that's...
So what would be some of those, what do you mean by techniques and tools, and what does that look like?
Well, at the heart of this conversation about finding purpose or living your calling is the ability to listen to a part of yourself that is most often muted, a part of yourself that isn't often listened to, and a part of yourself that our culture doesn't really reward you to listening to. And so if you think in terms of heart and mind as two basic centers, in general, we've been encouraged to live in a really left brain approach to the world. And the art of following and living calling actually comes from the heart, which is both the seat of desire as well as the seat of courage. And this process and practice is all about courage and desire. So passion and courage, there they are. Those are the two sources of what we're doing.
Following your heart, following the passion, following the courage, and certainly that's led you in all different kinds of directions, but I'm sure that for everyone here, in our own ways, has gone in all different kinds of directions, following your heart, and following that passion and that courage. Purpose is a loaded term, and you know, you think back to the late 90s, early 2000s, and Rick Warren writes Purpose-Driven Life.
Oh, did he?
So I've heard.
That's a book, huh?
Yeah, it's a book. People liked it a lot. And then there's churches were doing 40 days of purpose. I've heard about being a purpose-driven spouse, a purpose-driven family. You know, everything was very purpose-driven there for a number of years, and to a point where maybe the word was a little bit overused. My mind goes to thinking about Steve Martin in his 1979 movie The Jerk, where he also talks about purpose. No spoilers, but very different from Rick Warren.
Oh, okay.
Very different.
All right.
When you use the word purpose, is it still relevant? What do you mean by it?
I don't know if it's relevant.
Yeah.
I don't actually know. And I think you're right. The word purpose can mean multiple things.
Yeah.
So there are different kinds of purposes that all of us have, different levels of purpose. And I think Rick was trying to articulate the common purpose to all humanity. And I think that that's one sort of purpose. And he articulated it through the lens of his tradition to try to express to the world what he believes that everybody's purpose is in the world, which I think there's a great place for that.
Absolutely.
I would say then there's another purpose, which is your specific purpose, why you came into this world, not someone next to you. And I think that that's another level of purpose. It's a more specific level of purpose. And so my interest was, how do we go about finding that for ourselves? What are those processes, practices, things that we have to consider when we start embarking on that? Mm-hmm. So, but the word purpose maybe isn't the best word. So sometimes the word potential gets used. Sometimes the word calling gets used. But every single person has at some time or other asked the question, why am I here? And if they haven't, they just haven't asked it yet. So that's, I'm trying to play a small part in helping find an answer to that question.
Sure, sure. And you went to grad school, seminary, you became a pastor, you led entire communities of faith. You, how would you answer that "why am I here" question as a pastor, as a Jesus follower? And do you understand that God made us for specific things? And what's God's response? Mm-hmm. I mean, are we supposed to be doing it? Does it make God mad or sad, or I mean, what? What
sure. Well, to speak in really on two different levels. Why am I here? There is that, I think Rick Warren's trying to answer that universal question. I would probably articulate it a little differently than he would. And so I have an awareness and a conviction that every single person on the earth is here for a reason, and that if I gave you the words for that reason, it wouldn't mean as much as the experience. And I think I'm sitting on my mic.
All right.
Excuse me.
There we go.
Are we okay? Am I back? Was a problem. There I am, causing problems again.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. But I'm absolutely a believer that everybody here was crafted, created in a very specific way with a specific set of desires and resources and capacities and talents that and limits even, all of which conspire to become your purpose. And I don't think that there's any sense of punishment, anger, disappointment, or anything on the part of God if we are not living that purpose. I think there is the only cost and consequence is your own sense of no longer being aligned with the source of your existence. So that feels no good. That won't feel as good, but it is by no means a punishment. It's no different than I really, really want to hear classical music and I'm tuned to 92.5 FM. And if I'm tuned to the wrong frequency, I will not hear the music that I want to hear. And it's really about that judgmental. And there's no judgment in that. There's just the awareness that the frequency isn't aligned to the right thing that you most want. And so a lot of my work is helping people find a way to change that channel, to listen into the frequency that they're most passionate about.
Look, you briefly mentioned the word discovery. I mean, is there something to the discovery? What is it about the discovery that you get to discover these gifts?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I think is kind of fascinating is, so if God goes and gives you a purpose, and apparently we have that, or something, why don't I know what it is right away? Why do I have to go about working to uncover it? Especially in your 20s, when you're like, the world is my oyster. I don't know, there's all kinds of things that I like and could do, or maybe I shouldn't, or what do I know? I think that's really fascinating. Yeah. And what it makes me think of is my daughters, who are 8 and 5, they love to make things for me. And when they make me something, they will always insist that I walk into the room. Before I come in the room, they go, close your eyes. So I close my eyes, and then my 5-year-old takes me by the hand and bumps me into the doorway every time. So I've learned to look at the ground, but still out of the corner of my eye. Anyway. And then I walk in, and they go, open your eyes. And I open them, and I get really excited because of whatever it is. And so it's sort of that Christmas idea. Mm-hmm. There's something about the creative power of the universe that loves us enough to delight in our own surprise. And so the process of finding purpose is as important as the discovery itself. There's something about that experience of being surprised, of awakening more and more to this delightful surprise that the creative power of the universe wants to delight you. That's really, really blissful once we begin to see it that way, instead of feeling like there's some hidden maze that we better figure out, otherwise we're screwed.
Right. You also said, and something that I read from you at one point, what we can do and what we were made for are not the same. Understanding and living this distinction is one of our tasks in life. What we can do and what we were made for are not the same. Understanding and living this distinction is one of the main tasks in our life. Well, say more about that.
Yeah, so you've heard this analogy, I think, before. Some of you haven't. You can use a flute to stir soup, and it will work just fine. It'll actually work great, but it's not what it's made for. And if you never discover what a flute is made for, you will have missed one of the most miraculous and beautiful things on the planet, which is a soaring, gorgeous music. And I think many of us live this way. I think many of us have failed to make the distinction that there's a difference between what we can do and what we're made for. So you might be really good at a whole lot of things, and in fact, many of you probably are very good at a whole lot of things. But the real distinction between whether or not you're a flute in the soup or whether you're a flute being played is whether or not it gives you joy. That's the fundamental distinction. So I remember a woman who was working with me, volunteering in the community I led, and she was amazing at bookkeeping. She was just a fantastic accountant. And every time we met, she hated it. And I remember having to work with her to kind of begin to release the fact that everybody wanted her to do that, and she was so good at it, and she was better than anybody else in our community, and she just hated it. She just didn't want to do it. And part of my work with her is to go, you need to release that and allow it to go away and go pursue your joy. And she started to. She resigned and went on to do other things that gave her more joy. And she may not have been as good at those things as she was at bookkeeping, but she got better and better, and she was passionate about learning, and she collected more resources and more tools along the way. And this is the story of what it means to move from what you can do to what you're made for. Yeah, and that, by the way, takes courage. Mm-hmm. That's why I come back to the heart. The heart is the seat of courage, and it requires it. It's not for the faint of heart to make that shift, because there's risk involved. Mm-hmm. Taking that flute out of the soup and going, I wonder if it can play music.
Right.
What if it can't? What if it fails? What if it doesn't sound good?
What if it fails?
Right. Good question.
Yeah.
So that's why it takes courage.
I guarantee if I'm playing the flute, it's going to fail.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting word, fail. We love to think in terms of success and failure. Mm-hmm. I have spent a fantastic career being terrified of failure and pursuing success with all of my might and avoiding failure like the plague. That's just my thing in life. I don't like to fail. And so if I don't think I'm going to be amazing at it, I just won't compete. Well, this is a form of cowardice, and it's also a form of misunderstanding. And the misunderstanding is in the universe's eyes, in the eyes of the Creator, there is no such thing as success and failure. Okay. That doesn't exist. That's only my creation. That's only this community's creation. We all have consensus. We've decided that this means success and this means failure. Right. These are lies. These are illusions. This is misinformation. So when you look at your life and you say, I'm afraid of failing and I want to succeed, you will be far better off, every one of us, if we release those categories and create one category called feedback. I get feedback in my life. Mm-hmm. Feedback sometimes I like, and feedback sometimes I don't. Yeah. But there's no such thing as success or failure. It's just learning. And by the way, the feedback I like is information that helps me learn, and the feedback I don't like is information that helps me learn. Every stage along the way, get rid of the categories of success and failure, and you'll find courage begin to bloom in your heart.
Failure is feedback.
Failure is a form of feedback, and it's no different than a form of success. They're just forms of feedback. That's it.
Interesting. Looks like Chris has a question over there.
Yeah. So a couple questions coming in online, and I'm actually going to smash them together, and I don't know if this is what they intended or not.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
The first piece of this is, so I get to the place of truly figuring out my purpose. I kind of know what it is. Now what? Who do I talk to? What's my next step? And I think maybe kind of intertwined within that is this a solo thing, or is there any sort of divine revelation and IDAD community influence? Like, what does that look like at its best?
Yeah, you did smash a lot of questions together there. I'm not sure how to pick those apart. They're a little different. Let me think about that for a minute. So I'm going to take the community one first. You have to be very, very careful about the role of community in helping you determine your purpose. And the reason I say that is because the community has all kinds of agendas. Usually they're not conscious. And by community, I mean everyone in your life. Your parents, your spouse, your girlfriend, your kids, your friends. Everybody wants you to want something. And you may or may not actually want that. And so the real trick in allowing the community to be a part of any kind of process of discernment is you have to find people whose only interest is listening for and clearing space around and being available to confirm with no agenda the truth of your voice, no one else's voice. And a really great way of doing that are things like clearness committees, which the Quakers invented. And they're basically a group of 3 people with a focus person, and the focus person is asking a clear yes or no question about some part of their life, and the committee members are only allowed to ask open, non-leading questions. And their only goal is to get the focus person to uncover their true inner voice. Because the conviction is that that is the only voice that matters. That voice was planted there by God for the purpose of helping you live your life in the way that you're meant to. And that's really hard for most communities. Most communities come with a whole set of prefab judgments about what you should and shouldn't do. And the whole should and shouldn't language is about as useful as success and failure. There is no should and shouldn't. There is only an awareness of alignment or an awareness of not being aligned. That's it. And if you're not aligned, there's no should or shouldn't there. There's just you get to be aware of it. And here's a great indicator of whether you're aligned or not aligned. If you feel terrible, usually you're not aligned. Usually you're not aligned. It's not always the case. There are times when you go through a grief process. But if you just doesn't feel good, and this is another thing that's very unusual in our culture, to actually trust gut feelings is really hard for us. We like to be able to control. The mind likes to control. This process, it has no interest in control. It's a really, really wildly creative, wonderfully unpredictable, beautifully surprising and delightful process where you suddenly take your hands off the reins and life is lived for you rather than you trying to make it happen. That's like one question. I think there was a couple of others there that I don't know if I even came close. You want to try another one there? Or?
I suppose we could do that. So the second, I guess, maybe the second one that maybe was maybe touched on a little bit less was just, so I get to the place of truly figuring out my purpose. Now what? How do I?
Got it. So
how do I do that?
Purpose,
What's my next step?
Now, what's next? Okay, so in general, the deal with your purpose is, I don't know why it is. I suspect it's because of this desire to surprise. Like, God is like my children. We're like, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Now open them. Okay, now close your eyes again. Open them. That is happening all the time. So you may discover, like, my purpose is to be a, astronaut. Well, that's like 95 clicks down the road. So if you've decided that's your purpose, fantastic. Great. Hold on to that. But you're only given a lantern, not a spotlight. And a lantern only illuminates the next step. It doesn't illuminate the next 50. So the thing you have to get clear on, once you have the clarity of your purpose, you have to get clear on what is the next immediate step. And don't worry about what happens after that, because what you will always find is those 95 steps, even if you could plan them out, will change. So you're only responsible for what's next. And you only have to muster enough courage to do that next thing. You might, in fact, be afraid of something that's 3 steps away or 50 steps away. That might really scare you. That might inhibit your courage. But the really crucial thing is to go, don't worry about that. Right now, just enough courage to do the next step you know you have to do. And it doesn't actually take that long. Most people know, I actually know what my next step is. I have to research schools. Great. Research schools. It's that simple. No commitment beyond that. Just research schools. And then once you've researched schools, then develop the courage to do the next step.
You talked about the role of community in discernment, and that to me seems important. You know, in the clearness committee, you call them? I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, I think with God's voice can be heard through community. I think you can, when you clear away the clutter, you can hear God speaking, you know, in your heart. You can hear it through the community. But I think, doesn't the community check what you think is, you know, I want to be an astronaut. And my community, specifically my wife, would say, no. You know, no.
Here, I would say, like, spouses are some of the most dangerous inhibitors of people living their purpose. I mean that.
Yeah.
As a spouse or a partner, myself included, you have so much at stake and so much invested that you're full of a whole lot of need to control. Yeah. Don't go there, because then that's going to affect me. I got so much at nope, you can't. So that's one of the hardest places where people get caught up and hooked in their inability to find the courage to live, according to what they're here to do. I would say that the role of the community is not to check you against some abstract thing about whether that's good or bad or right or wrong, or whether you're going to hurt people. The reality is this: in this life, you will hurt people at times. Every one of us will hurt people at times. And the reason we'll do that is because we will want things they don't want us to want. Because the thing that I want will be at odds with what they want. That is the nature of this existence. It will not go away. So your choice is never between hurting people and not hurting people. Your choice is between hurting people with your truth or hurting people with your lies. That's our choice. And it's really liberating and really unfortunate all at the same time. Yeah. And so I guess what I mean to say is the role of the community is there to check you, but not check you against something they think is right. It's to check you against whether or not they really hear the truth from you. So a community can absolutely be a mirror and go, you know, everything you're saying, I don't hear your truth in that. That doesn't feel true to me in this moment. Something about that is amiss. I'd like to explore that more with you. But what I'm after is getting to your truth, not what I think you should do. Sure. Not what that person thinks you should do. Not what your parents think you should do. What you are here to do. Sure. And I'm here to be uncompromising and unleashing that.
Yes, yes. And so when I was trying to figure out if I was called to be a pastor, if I was called to go to seminary, I'm living in Colorado at the time, and I'm at the grill, and I'm just fuming. I can't figure anything out. My wife says to me, "Can you not go to seminary?"
Yeah, please.
Right? Right?
Was there a please at the end? Can you please not go to seminary?
No, it was more like...
I know. Yeah.
It was more like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, can you not go?
Yeah.
Because if the answer is yes, I don't have to go, okay. But if this is what the call is, do we have a choice?
Yeah.
Is this, yeah.
I would argue you always have a choice. Always.
Yeah.
And every choice comes with a consequence.
Okay.
Every single choice comes with a consequence, not a punishment. And you have to ask yourself, can you accept the consequence of your choice?
Yeah.
That's what you have to answer. And there are going to be many times where every one of us will decide not to do the courageous thing because we will not be prepared to accept the consequence. And that's okay. There should be no judgment on yourself. There are going to be times in life when you will not have the internal resources to deal with the possible consequences of your choice. And I would say, until you are ready to accept the consequences, don't go there. But that is the deal. So even when you feel like I don't have a choice, you actually always have a choice. What you are saying is, I can't accept the consequences of that choice. That's what we're really saying. And I think it's really important to clarify that, because anytime you say, I don't have a choice, you're suddenly a victim. And that's a lie. You're never a victim, ever. Even when you think you are, you're not. Nobody likes to hear that, but it's true.
So Chris, did you...
Let's see. So here's maybe kind of a two-parter, just maybe it kind of depends a little bit on kind of where you're at in kind of the span of your life. I kind of look at this and I think, okay, so I graduated with a degree in church music. I'm working at a church playing music. Like, I did pretty well so far anyway. But there's a ton of people that can't come away from college with a degree and they absolutely can't stand where they're at. Or there's a lot of people that have been maybe in a job for a while, and they know, like, hey, this isn't the right spot. I gotta do something. So when you kind of knowingly are in a position that you're just kind of aware isn't the right place, yet there's kind of some economic and kind of investment realities into where you're currently at. What would be maybe some advice or encouragement in terms of moving toward where you feel kind of your broader call is?
So as it relates to coming out of college and not sure what's going on, I think a really, really helpful thing that I've heard before is your 20s are called your trying years. And what they mean by that is just try things. Try as many things as you can and see what starts to feel sticky. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think there's some permission and allowance, especially in the 20s, to do that. As you get older, those opportunities to try more things gets harder and harder. The costs go up, the responsibilities go up, and the consequence of your choices are greater. So there's a lot of room there. As it relates to the question of resources, which I get that question a lot, like, well, to do what I want to do, I would need to be independently wealthy, or I would need to have this, or I'd need to have this, and I don't have that, and I have kids, and I have these responsibilities and these obligations, and I respect all of that. I think it's all valid and real. But I would also say that the first thing you have to get clear on is, what do I want? What do I want? What do I want? What do I want? When you get really clear on what it is you want, even if you think it's impossible, doesn't matter. Get clear on what you want and begin to focus your attention there. Second question you ask is, what resources will I need to get there? What resources do I already have to get me there? And what resources will I need to get there? And by resources, I mean every part of your being. There might be internal resources you don't have yet. For example, courage. That would be an internal resource. You might have another internal resource, like a certain gift mix, a skill set that you haven't developed in order to do what it is you most want. So your job is to figure out the next step, which is, I'm all afraid about not having enough money, but I don't even have the skill yet. So maybe I need to start working that skill a bit. How much money do you need? When will you need it by? How long will that take? What are the steps you could take to start imagining different ways to get those resources? So the first question, though, is, what do I want? The second one is, what resources do I have? The third one is, what resources do I need to develop? And the last one is, can I accept the ecological consequences of my choices? And there will be consequences no matter what. And many of them will be delightful consequences. My experience has been, when you find the thing you're made for, the things that are hard about a job aren't very hard. They're just a part of being who you are. It's a little like someone going, Shane, you're 6 feet tall. Is that hard to be 6 feet tall? Not really. I mean, I'm sure there are limits, like I can't buy certain clothes, or airplanes are a little tight or whatever, but I don't spend a whole lot of time wringing my hands over my height. It's just what I am. So a lot of that question of, can I handle the consequences? Can I handle the consequences? I would actually say, when you get clear on what you want and it's really clear, you will enjoy the consequences. They will feel like coming home, even if they're scary now. they will feel like coming home.
Are there questions from the audience that's here that have been raised?
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about that. If you use it as a victim, like there's no such thing as a victim.
Yeah, so I say that, and I usually get pushback on that statement, especially from someone who does the work you do. There are victims in your line of work, mind you. So maybe I said that a little harshly. But I think what I mean by victim in this context is there have been many times in my life when I've wanted something to happen and I have felt I couldn't make it happen. That I don't have a choice. I'm stuck. I can't do that. And what I realized was, as I went through the process of wrestling with myself and with God and with everything, I started to realize that the corner that I thought was there, I had created. That the corner I thought I had painted myself into, those walls behind me, they were my creation. And when I suddenly realized that I was the one propping those walls up and that I could actually let them drop, suddenly I went, oh, I can go left. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that I was doing that. And the reason I was doing it was I could not accept the consequences. So that's why it was important. When I reframed that for myself, I started getting clear and going, I can't accept those consequences. That's different. That's empowering. That says the ball's in my court. Whenever I'm ready, I can drop it. I'm not ready now. No problem. Suddenly I'm not suffering as much. Suddenly I'm accepting myself more. And I wait, and I wait, and I question, and I pray, and I look, and I consider, and then all of a sudden one day something shifts. Oh, I can accept that. Okay. Down it goes. Now other people may not like me accepting that. Other people might be really angry with me doing that. And that's going to be one of the consequences I have to accept. People's disappointment, people's frustration, people's disagreement. Sometimes you might choose something that you could lose a friendship over. That happens. Can you accept that consequence? Well, it depends. What do you want? I want friendship. Well, then you probably want to go that route because you will lose the friendship potentially. That's why it's so clear, it's so crucial that you get clear on what is it you want. That desire was given for a reason. And all of us must become slaves to that desire because it will lead us to freedom.
You mentioned, as you were talking about that, about prayer. What role does prayer play in your discernment?
Well, I actually think the most useful kind of prayer would be what some people call centering prayer.
Okay.
Which is the kind of prayer that creates what you might call an indifference. Meaning you learn to become less attached to everything. And that doesn't mean dissociated. You're still present, you're still connected, you're still conscious and aware, but you're no longer moved by every whim of yourself or others. And that sort of indifference, that kind of detachment, allows you to begin to see with clarity. Because now you're no longer insisting on something. And what happens when you do that kind of prayer, which is really just a grounding, centering prayer where you clear your mind and you allow yourself to watch what goes through your mind, watch what goes through your body without making comments, judgments. You don't attach, you don't resist, you just let things go. As you become a witness of everything that's happening, your desires become more and more, less and less contaminated, I should say. Okay. You begin to feel the purity of that longing. And once you have that, you can attach yourself to that. Okay. But before you can attach yourself to that, I'm already attached to so many things all the time. I want people to approve of me. I want people to like me. I want to have a certain amount of money. I want to have my kids feel this way about me. I want that to happen. I need this. I don't want that. I need that. All that stuff, we have to be careful about how attached we are. But then once you have the desire, hold on and tight as you can. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Any other questions, either from in-house or online, Chris, that we're missing? Okay.
I think one of the biggest criticisms of people in their 20s and 30s and subsequent generations is that we're becoming increasingly individualistic and self-obsessed, and selfies, the whole culture. And sometimes questions of purpose end up becoming very individualistic kind of questions. How do you think our Christian faith compels us to have the freedom to ask questions of our individual lives and purpose, but also compels us toward greater questions of the purpose that Jesus clearly set out to love and serve one's neighbor? How can we live in both of these worlds of caring deeply about our individual purpose, but not becoming so self-obsessed that we miss out on this greater picture that Jesus has already clearly set forth?
Great question. So I think there's a great deal of validity to the fact that longitudinal research has demonstrated that most of these self-focused media that have been created in the last 10 years have actually increased levels of narcissism and have persisted long after it's normal. Like, young people are notoriously narcissistic, but they are starting earlier and lasting longer now, in part because of, like, Facebook, which looks like a window to the world, is actually just a mirror to masquerade. And actually I look in a mirror of myself and how many friends I have, and I curate my image to the world, and I fixate on my image. And so all of those things cultivate that sort of self-focused approach. And that is, in fact, the wrong kind of self I'm talking about. So that would be what you might call the false self, the curated self, the self you project to the world. So anyone who's spending a great deal of time and energy trying to protect, defend, and nurture the false self, their sense of calling and purpose will mostly be met with a great deal of frustration. And their sense of being aligned will feel at odds. So my heart actually goes out to that generation that's emerging, that culture that's emerging, because those things do a disservice to them. It creates more and more barriers to actually connecting with the true self instead of the false self. And that's going to be ultimately more painful for them than it is for the world. Yes, there's some problems with maybe being self-focused, but for them it's going to cause suffering. So those that begin to wake up to those things and begin to practice some of the stuff that I'm talking about will begin to awaken what I was called the true self. And the beautiful thing about the true self is the true self is put there by God. So whatever it is that the true self wants, once you know you have the true self, it can't help but benefit the world. But you have to be careful about that, because we often assume we can judge what's beneficial and what's not. So we have to be careful as a community to go, well, that choice doesn't have all the positive outcomes I want to see, so that can't be a valid choice. And what I'd like to say is, actually, we don't know whether that choice has beneficial outcomes. So someone who's really good at art isn't so much serving the homeless. Does that mean that that doesn't have beneficial outcomes? Well, some of us would clearly say, of course it does. And others might go, no, it's frivolous. Your judgment is irrelevant. The true self will find its own purpose in the world, and it must do it and live it fearlessly without concern or care for the judgment of others. And I believe that those that do that will have no choice but to benefit the world. Does that help? Am I on the right track? Do you want to push back at all?
No.
Okay. It's all right if you do. It's okay to disagree.
I had one. What would be kind of advice or things that you can do to help, as being within a committed relationship, to be able to help the person that you're with or part of your community to find their calling without realizing the negative consequences that may have on you? So
Yeah. No, that's not for the faint of heart, and it's a really great question. And it's one of the most complicated pieces of finding your purpose and living it is partners. The first thing that I would say is there has to be an element of trust. Trust that you're together for a reason. Trust that God actually loves you and cares for you and will not leave you alone and will not betray you. And an awareness that at the same time, this other person that I've devoted my life to is not put on this earth to make me feel okay. That their job is not here to meet my every need. And that is a difficult dance for every one of us. That no one will ever be able to fulfill the things we need them to fulfill for us to feel okay about ourselves. So the work of actually doing this calling is the work of self-differentiation in intimate relationships. And it means learning to stand on our own 2 feet, take care of ourselves and responsibility for ourselves, and allow them to take care of themselves. And oddly, until you have a self like that, you can't meaningfully relate to anyone because you don't have a self to relate with. So it's a really counterintuitive thing, and it's especially true in young relationships, not just young age-wise, but even if you're older and you're in an early stage of a relationship. The first stage of any relationship is fusion. You sort of give yourself over to the whims of the other person because you're trying to find commonality. It's normal, it's healthy, it's good, but it's, oh my gosh, you like Italian? I like Italian. You're looking for similarities, commonalities, everything that works together, and yeah, we're like on the same wavelength. You go long enough and you start to realize, actually, you know what, I don't like Italian as much as you do. I'm kind of over here, and I like this kind of Italian. Actually, I don't even like to eat out at all. And you know what, I feel like this is, and relationships are people growing machines. And when you encounter those kinds of differences, that is the opportunity to get clear on who you are and who you need to become in the world. So that's kind of a larger stepping back, looking at it and going, this is what the dynamics are. As it relates to helping your partner get clearer, knowing that it could have really negative consequences for you, this is where our task is to learn ways of self-care. Learn ways of holding on to ourselves, strategies that allow us to hold on to the strength that we have, knowing that if I really love this person, I will free them to be whatever it is they need to be, knowing that I may not be able to go there with them. And that means that I'll have to renegotiate this relationship in ways that I didn't want to, but that maybe I can. But it starts there, knowing I'm clear about who I am and what I need. Now I need to be really clear about how I let them become who and what they need to be. That's a tremendous act of maturity. And it takes years of development to get there. But that's the kind of the goal. That's the goal. Does that help? Am I in the right territory? You want to push back or ask more?
I do want to ask a little bit more. And you're going at it from like the intimate relationship, but like, you know, from also looking at it as like friends and family and, and knowing that, you know, if they make that choice, like you were talking about, a friendship might end. Well, if you're trying to help a friend and it's your friendship to them that's going to end, how do you, it's taking that ability and saying, okay, I'm okay with this because I know that this is what you want.
So I think you're asking a really important question, and I'm not sure I fully get it yet. So I do want to make sure I understand it. You're asking, could you put a finer point on the scenario? I mean, I understand why you're asking it, but you're saying you're a friend, you have a friend, and this friend wants to do something that if they do, it will end the friendship for you?
Yes.
And how do you know it will end the friendship for you?
I don't, but it's just one of those things where, you know, they make a choice and it's like, I can't associate with you anymore because you've made this choice.
Okay, got it. Well, then it sounds like you're really clear on who you want to be friends with. Yeah, and I think there's some grief that may come with that, but undoubtedly that person has full freedom to make whatever choices they need to make, and we are better served in this world when we allow people to make choices for their own life. They're the ones who have to live the consequences, not us. You might also explore in yourself, what is it in me that won't allow me that friendship? Sometimes we are, and I'm not saying this is true of you, but sometimes it can be true of people. We get caught up in abstract rules and boundaries and roles that we believe are okay and not okay, that they're right or they're wrong. The more you can free yourself of the categories of right and wrong in life purpose issues and just choices, even if you think it's sin, the better off you'll be. And what I mean by that is, the more you can see someone and go, you have a choice and a consequence. And I can allow you to make whatever choice you want as long as you can accept the consequence. That frees you from responsibility. So what I hear in what you ask is that the reason I can't associate with you is because then suddenly I'm complicit with you. It's not true. You're not complicit in anything anyone else does, even if they say you are. Your opportunity is to say, this is how I live. And then you get to choose how you want to live. And I'll be in relationship with you anyway, even if it's not the way I like to do things. Not sure if that's getting any closer. Are we circling? Okay.
So
We have apparently a question coming from online over here.
So, and maybe in some ways it's maybe a little bit of a follow-up to that. So, in some of those relationships, we're the outer voices. And you know, you mentioned earlier, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they're outer voices. You have to try to discern that. So maybe the thing is, when we're in those situations, how do we encourage one another to live in the truth of their calling, and maybe in some of those decisions, and just kind of use our voice for good. Maybe just even if you had some just kind of simple advice, you know, here's a good way to approach something, or don't approach it this way. You know, whatever advice you may have for those kind of situations.
Yeah, so if you're working with others who are trying to make choices and you feel like you got a line on the truth, I would say you absolutely want to have the courage to speak your truth as you see it. But the most important thing is to divest yourself of all outcomes. Because if you speak your truth and they don't agree with it, and then you need to harp and hound them until you agree with it, or you'll threaten to cut the relationship off unless you do it your way, you're basically trying to get them to validate you. You're doing everything you can to make yourself feel okay, and you're allowing their choices to dictate how you feel. This is a kind of fusion and enmeshment that is unhelpful. So a lot of the best way you can interact with people is to completely divest yourself of the outcomes of whatever choices they make, and allow yourself to be loving towards them with truth. It's okay to say, hey, this is my guts telling me, I want to share it with you, you take it for what it's worth. And the person may go, you're way off base. You go, all right, it's just what my gut's telling me. That's okay. It's okay to disagree. And you don't have to back down, or you don't have to rationalize it, and it's okay to speak it. But the more you're able to divest of outcomes, and the less you feel that it's your responsibility to make sure someone lives a certain way, the more service you can offer them. And something really weird happens. This happened to me as a counselor, therapist, guide type person. When it was really important to me that whatever intervention I offered that they take, when I felt like this is like good stuff you're getting from me, you need to take this, and I'm going to prevent you a lot of pain. And I'm pretty intuitive, and I've been right more often than I've been wrong, and you know, that whole thing, all that may be true actually, but the problem is they could sense that I needed them to change for me. Humans are a bizarre creature. As soon as somebody can sniff that out from me, even if I'm right, they're like, no way I'm doing that. I'm not going to live to validate you and your needs to be like important and successful. Forget that. No, I'm going to go over here and screw around because you said that. When I started to detach, not from my love, but just no need for them to do what I say, people started doing the things I said. And I didn't feel any better or worse when they did the things I said. I wasn't like, yes, finally I'm successful and effective in my coaching. No, there was like, that was an era where I was that way. But then after a while, I was like, I don't know if I'm effective or successful. I'm not real interested in that category. All I know is I can hurt them with my truth or my lies. Which do I choose? I choose truth. And then I'll still love them. They may not like me, but I'll still be there. And if they wrap their Ferrari around a tree, I'll be there in the hospital afterwards. Even if I said you probably shouldn't get in that car drunk, I'll still be there afterwards. I don't make judgments on that. How could I? I know what it's like to not have the courage to make the right choices. Everybody should know what that feels like. So that sort of compassion and capacity to speak truth without being attached is crucial. Mackenzie.
My question is, what are your thoughts on, like, how do you free yourself from other people's judgments? Not only, like, other people's judgments, but your judgments that come from within, and how do you find that courage through that release of that?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a great question. So I love that. I mean, I think all of us have a really, really strong internalized inner critic, right? It's the part of you that's constantly narrating what you're doing and whether it's good or bad or right or wrong, whether you could be doing it better or whether you messed that up and, oh, that person's going to be mad at you and, man, you really screwed that one up. And all that stuff, that inner monologue, I call it the barking dog. You just want to put it on a leash and, like, heal because it's useless. It offers no value whatsoever. So one of the skills that I try to teach and practice and learn how to do is to cultivate non-judging awareness of what is. So there's something really interesting. The more judgmental we feel about something, the more distorted we view it. The more we can actually cultivate simply a non-judging awareness of whatever is, making no assessment about its goodness or badness, its shouldness or shouldn'tness, the more we can cultivate that, the more clearly we see. And the more clearly we see, the easier it is to make choices. So one of the first steps is become aware of how judgmental I am. And notice it in a non-judging way. Like, oh, look, there I go again. Look how unbelievably critical I am of myself. I'm really good at that. That's really funny. And then relax it and let it be. I don't even have to fight it. I'm not judging my judgment. I just let it be. And then I watch others and I go, wow, I am really harsh on that person right now. Okay. Look at how I go. That part of me is always there. It's always available to me, and I can choose it at any time. I can also choose to not do it. Either way is fine, but I have to notice it first. And usually when you judge something, it becomes your shadow. That part of me is bad and unacceptable, and it goes whoop underground because you're no longer acceptable. And once it's not acceptable, it just goes into the shadows and it operates. So that's a lot of it. It's just allowing yourself. You guys familiar with the movie 8 Mile? You know Eminem? Mm-hmm. He does this incredible thing as an actor where he plays a young white rapper in Detroit. He stretches himself kind of as a character study.
It's impressive.
It is an impressive character study. And if you're not familiar with the movie, the way that it goes is you have these rap-offs where you basically rap battles and you basically try to insult the other rapper.
And we're going to do that.
We're going to do that shortly. We're going to do that shortly. And then whoever insults better wins. The crowd judges, and then you go to the next competition. And so Eminem rises through the ranks, and he gets to the championship, and he's going out against the worst guy ever. And he has to go first, which is definitely not the position you want to be in. You want to go last because then you can use all the ammo and blah, blah, blah. And Eminem raps and steals all the guy's thunder and basically talks about what an awful, horrible human being he is. And basically says, you're going to say this about me? I'm even worse than that. And here's how bad this is about me. And you think that's bad? Look at what I can do. And at the end, the guy has nothing to say. He stole all of his thunder. That is like classic shadow work, where you try on the suit that you fear the most, where you let the dragon that frightens you swallow you, and you realize you're actually okay, and God knew it all along and didn't think any less of you. And you can relax now. And then you can choose differently. So hopefully that... Is that getting at the question a bit?
Sorry, another question.
Okay.
Another question that I have. I don't know where it went.
Thank you. We're good? All right. My piggyback question, I guess, would be how do you differ from like self-love? Because once you let go of those judgments, you're more able to self-love and thus self-care. But how do you differ from self-love from the narcissistic, as she was talking about?
Mm-hmm. So, narcissism is a product of ego. Self-love is a product of the heart. The ego is concerned with survival, fear, competition. Narcissism is, I'm better than. It is comparative. I'm going to do this for me and not for you. It has a quality of that. It's constricted, it's tight, and it's mostly leads to a lot more pain. Self-love is wide open. It has no concern one way or another for any kind of competition. And it blooms in the center of your chest. And you simply relax like you're relaxing in a warm bath. And so that's one way to distinguish between narcissism and the self-love. One is the ego, the other is heart. And you will feel the vibrational difference of those two, and I'm sure even as I say it, you have known moments of both. I have known moments of both. And narcissism comes with a whole lot of fear and instability, because you could lose something. Whereas self-love comes with no fear. Fear dissolves, and there's just enjoyment and acceptance and appreciation. Yeah.
We have one over here, another one online.
Yeah, so I'm kind of getting a couple questions that I think maybe the heart of them in some ways is all a little bit related. In that, like, we have ideas about maybe what God desires for us and what we desire for us. And sometimes if we go too far to the end of maybe our own desires, this idea that we lose a little bit or lose sight of where God maybe wants us and is showing us that. And so just kind of how do we prevent our own wants and desires from getting in the way of maybe the way that God wants us to be among others?
Great question. I think I mentioned this a bit today. I don't know if any of you were in this adult hour, but the issue of desire, especially in religious communities, is really scary for most people. We've been taught to be suspicious of desire, that desire comes with a level of danger, that it's like a fire and you have to be careful. And historically, when you're a kid growing up, that's usually around sex. But it sort of transposes into all of life, like be careful of any desire, because it could all be mutated and dangerous and sinful and all that good stuff. So I generally work against that theory and say that actually your desire, even the ones you think are dark, are actually planted there by God, and that they are there for a reason, and they should be welcomed and allowed to emerge. There is a big difference, though, between a desire and a decision. So you can have the desire and make no judgment about it as bad or good or anything. It doesn't mean you have to act on it immediately. You can just allow the desire to emerge and then reflect on it. The less judging you are of the desire, the less likely you are to make an immediate choice about it. And so that's one piece. The other thing, though, is what you're really getting at is you're talking about different kinds of desires, which I think they're all from God, actually. I think they're all from God. There are those desires that are deeper than other desires. And those surface desires are whims. They come and they go. They pass rapidly. But deeper desires have a more abiding quality to them. And they provide a little more of a tree trunk guidance rather than leaves that can fall from the tree. You're talking about the trunk-like desire. That's the one I'm always after for people. That's the one I want to get them to, because it'll guide everything. Everything else takes care of itself when you have the trunk. And so one of the things that I'll do with some people, and I've done myself, which is helpful, is there are two exercises. The first exercise is the exercise that's a clearing exercise to help you find what it is you most want. And it begins with a little bit of centering, a few minutes of centering, breathing consciously, getting a little detachment, and learning that kind of indifference. And then it's an exploration of desire, and you ask yourself the question, what do I want? And you can write this on a page. You ask, what do I want? And you write down the first thing that comes to mind. You make no judgments about whatever it is. So if it's, I want sleep, write sleep. I want a cheeseburger, write cheeseburger. I want to be rich and famous, write rich and famous. I want everyone to like me, write everyone to like me. I want to help people, right? Help people. Now, every one of us here could look at that and go, well, that's bad because cheeseburgers are bad for you for these reasons, and everyone to like you and fame, you should never want fame, so you shouldn't do that. Forget all that. Forget all the judgment, because when you do that, you actually get beneath the surface of things. You allow whatever it is to be whatever it is, but you'll notice that when I went down that list, one of them might strike a chord, and you can keep going and going and going. And at the end of that list, you circle the ones that seem to have the most life. So you might go, help people. Oh, that's interesting. And then you might go, play music. Oh, that one feels like there's life there. And you might go and find these various things. From there, once you've selected those, the next practice you can offer is a further step in inviting God's involvement in your desire. And instead of saying, God, your will be done, meaning I'll just be obedient, and even if I don't want it, you'll do it. You actually ask God for desire. And you pray this prayer. God, help me to want what you want me to want. It's nice and cumbersome, right? Help me to want what you want me to want. You can pray that prayer 10 times a day, just as you're walking down the street in your own mind. God, help me to want what you want me to want. Help me to want what you want me to want. And over a period of weeks, that desire, I promise you, will start to codify, start to become more and more clear and more and more clear and more and more clear. And as it does, if it feels really good, live it. But if it still feels really terrifying, Then you do the next prayer, which is like the black and white prayer. You simply say, God, this is the desire that I now have. If it is from you, make it abundantly clear. And if it is not from you, let it pass from my awareness. And then trust it. And if it doesn't pass from your awareness, do not pass go. Pass go, collect $200, go straight into it. So you can see those stages. The one is surfacing, desires of all kinds, even the dark ones, terrifying ones, even the ones you shouldn't have. Surface them anyway. Be as dark as you want to be and don't judge any of it. Next one is help me to want what you want me to want, after you've sort of intuited those ones. And the last one is, if it's from you, make it abundantly clear. If it is not, let it pass from my awareness. So this is one of the ways we can deal with that question of, am I on God's terms or my terms or what's going on? And frankly, I think all of that is a conditioned response that is ultimately unhelpful. But I know what it's like to be afraid, and I respect it a lot. I have it myself, and so this is a helpful way to sequence through and out of those conundrums and questions.
Okay. I think we probably have time for one more question if there's one out there either on the floor or online.
So one thing that I think is really maybe sometimes hard to determine is, you spoke a little bit this morning about seasons of calling. And one of the, first of all, maybe just for those that obviously didn't hear, kind of recap, what do you mean by that? And also, how do you know when it's a tough spot and when there's really kind of a calling and a push to something different? Like, how do you sort those out?
Great. Yeah, good question. So for those who weren't there or didn't hear today, whatever skills that you begin to use from this conversation, whatever things you learn them well, because you'll use them again and again and again and again. Because life and its purpose is never linear. It spirals outward in cycles, ever more complex, often retracing the same territory, but in a new way with all kinds of new experiences. And that spiral has a seasonal quality to it. It has an emerging quality, a peaking quality, and an exiting quality, just like the seasons of nature. And so pay attention to what season of calling and life purpose you're in, because it's not the same techniques for different seasons. So if everything in your life, when you reflect on it now, you're like, man, I am just enjoying what I'm doing a great deal in my relationship, and everything just feels like it's in the right spot, that is summer. Things are in bloom, the weather is warm, thank God, and everything's fine. And there's not a lot of change, it's just enjoyment. If you're at another stage where you reflect on your life and you go, you know what, everything is right. Like, I can't point to any one thing that isn't right, but something feels like I'm not happy, or I'm bored, or I'm dissatisfied, but I have no reason to be dissatisfied because everything's awesome and I'm actually like seeing so much fruit, and it just, that's autumn, that's fall. Fall is the season of abundance and harvest, but awareness that the leaves are turning. They haven't fallen yet. In fact, they're quite beautiful. But there's this awareness that you enter something that is no longer going to last. That's a very different kind of conversation. If you're in summer, you're not likely here today. Because when you're in summer, you're like, I don't have any questions, I'm good. When you're in fall, you're also maybe not likely to be here, but you can. Depends on how, if you're late fall, then you're probably here. Early fall, you're probably not here. You're like raking it in. You're just enjoying the harvest. Winter, that's what drives us to be in settings like this, asking these kinds of questions. Winter is when you really are in the unknown. It is when the sun has set, the ice has frozen the earth, the leaves have fallen from the trees, and you don't see any fruit. You don't even see the leaves. In fact, you don't even know if that tree out there is dead or alive. And you have no idea what kind of a tree it is because you can't even see the leaves. That is a period of the most acute unknown. And in the realm of calling, that is the winter of calling. And it is often quite painful, often quite fearful, often accompanied by quite a bit of grief. But as long as we know it's winter,
that grief doesn't have to be so acute. And as long as we know it's winter, that unknown becomes something that we get to anticipate with hope and expectation. Because in the same way that now it's winter, none of us in this room are wringing our hands over whether or not the trees are going to bloom, are we? Every one of us in this room knows, no matter how long the winter is, spring always comes. And there's a calm in that. Yeah, it's annoying, and yeah, I think we're eager for it to come, and I'm tired, it's late in the winter, and come on, let's do this. But we're not despairing. And that's something that I want people to understand. When they're feeling that sense of, I don't know what it is, I want them to know, I promise you spring comes. So winter is a great time to do that what do I want process. That's a blank slate. What do I want? What do I want? What do I want? That's a great time for that. Spring is when you feel this incredible sense of, I feel like I'm on the verge of something. I don't yet know what it is, but I'm pretty sure that green bud on that tree is going to be a leaf. I don't know what kind of leaf. I don't know what kind of fruit, but I know it's going to be something. And I'm excited about the fact that it's alive. It's also delicate. That little shoot that has sprouted up, you're like, protect that. Keep that careful. I want to make sure it flourishes, because I'm a little nervous about whether or not this thing is going to take off the way I want it to. Sandbox Cooperative is in the spring of its existence. There's clearly a little bud. You have some idea of what it might be, but it's uncertain about whether or not it'll make it. And spring is a time of both a posture of anticipation. There's going to be some nervousness and fear, but allow that to become part of the energy that drives it. That's what spring becomes. And spring is a great time to do the second stage of that practice, which is, if this is from you, God, make it abundantly clear. If it's not, let it pass from my awareness. If this green shoot is really going to be something, because I'm going to protect it, but if it's not, go ahead and kill it now, because I don't want to waste my time on it. That's kind of the springtime. So those are the seasons. And now I forgot your question.
So the second part of that is, how do you know when you're in a specific season versus a tough spot?
Right. Great question. I think the thing to be aware of is there has to be some patience in what it is you're creating. So when you go through a rough patch, give it a little bit of time. Allow that rough patch to teach you, and go ahead and ask some hard questions. But if the rough patch continues to persist, start asking the what do I want question. That will begin to surface, and you might go, oh my goodness, this rough patch is because I don't want this anymore. Or who knows what. The other thing I'll just say about this process of living who you're supposed to be is it's a creative process. You are a co-creator with God in making your life what you want it to be. And sometimes people feel really impatient and really frustrated with that process. So what I want to leave you with is this image. When a sculptor decides to sculpt something, if they could snap their fingers and have it completely done, already finished in every way that it was meant to be, and they could go, boom, done, sculpture made. No one would ever do that. No artist would ever want to do that. Artists love to actually craft it, and they struggle with it. They wrestle with it. They uncover it, and they go, oh, I didn't think it was going to look like that. That is like a discovery, a connection. Something happened and unfolded, and it took me months to get there, and that process was part of the calling. And so what we are creating, not with clay, but with the elements of existence, what we are creating with relationships, what we're creating with spaces we make, what we're creating with careers and contributions we make, all of these things that we are busy creating are like that sculpture. Go ahead and wrestle with it. Let it take time. Let it unfold, because there is joy, immense joy in creation. And that is what it means to be made in the image of God. God is a creator, and this is what it means to be co-creators. You are not simply passively waiting for God to unfold it for you. You are actively engaged in creating, and God is funding it with you.
Thank you so much. This image of this idea that we can get at the beautiful thing that God has made us to be, and the idea that the flute isn't stirring the soup, but making the music that God has put there all along. Is powerful images, and we're so thankful for your time with us today, Shane.
My pleasure.
Let's thank Shane for his time as the brave first person in the Sandbox. And so,
you all were wonderful. Thank you.
We kind of bring this to a close. Again, our very first Sandbox Cooperative, and we're really hopeful that there'll be many more to come. We're already planning a session to take place in September or October, and we're currently lining up a speaker for that. We're also trying to gather funding from various sources to make it happen. If you'd like to make a donation to us, there is a donate tab at the Sandbox Cooperative website that you can make a contribution if you would like to. Also, if you're having a viewing party, thank you. I've heard that we've been having them all over the country. What, in California? Where are some of the places, Chris?
We've had Colorado, South Dakota, D.C., Wisconsin, Florida, all over the place. It's been awesome.
Fantastic. And just knowing that we can be community together, even if it's a national community, even if we're joining online, that's more of what I'm looking forward to, kind of figuring out what seeds were planted today and how they might bear fruit, and we might see the first buds of a springtime of calling. Thank you so much for spending a portion of your Sunday night with us. Chris Roberts and the band, they're going to be playing in a little bit. But don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, check out what's coming. We're going to be back at it this fall, but between now and then, have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.